Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a handsome prince. Now, this prince wasn't just handsome. He was also incredibly picky. He had decided it was time to get married, but he wouldn't marry just anyone. Oh no, he had to marry real princess. The problem was, real princesses were surprisingly hard to find. He traveled all over the world, from the sunny south to the icy north, meeting every princess he could. There were princesses who could sing like canaries, princesses who could paint like masters, and even one who could juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. They were all impressive, sure, but were they real princesses? The prince always found something not quite right. One princess slurped her soup a little too loudly. Another had a laugh that sounded a bit like a donkey. A third one, well, she had a terrible habit of picking her nose when she thought no one was looking. So the prince returned home, feeling quite downcast and more than a little bit lonely. He sat in his grand castle, sighing dramatically and staring out the window, convinced he'd be a bachelor forever. His mother, the queen, was a very wise and practical woman. She patted his shoulder and said, "Don't you worry, my dear. The right princess will turn up when you least expect it." The prince just sighed again, unconvinced. Then, one evening, a truly terrible storm rolled in. The sky turned black, thunder roared like a furious giant, and lightning split the heavens. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the castle moat into a swirling, muddy river. It was the kind of night where you just want to curl up by the fire with a good book and a cup of hot cocoa. Suddenly, amidst the howling wind and crashing thunder, there was a loud knocking at the castle gate. "Knock kano kike kano ck." The old king himself went down to see who on earth could be out on a night like this. When he opened the heavy oak door, he found a young woman standing there, looking like a drowned kitten. Water was streaming from her hair and her clothes. It ran out of the tips of her shoes and dripped from the end of her nose. She was soaked through and through, shivering from the cold. But even so, she held her head high and said, with a surprisingly clear voice, "Good evening. I am a real princess." The old king looked her up and down. A real princess? Dressed in rags and looking like she'd just taken a swim in the moat? It seemed unlikely. The prince, who had followed his father, was equally skeptical. She was pretty, yes, but a princess? He had his doubts. But the old queen, who had also come to see what the commotion was about, just smiled a secret little smile. "Well, we'll soon find out if that's true," she thought to herself. She didn't say anything out loud, of course. Instead, she welcomed the girl inside with a warm smile. Come in, you poor dear, you must be freezing. We'll get you a warm room for the night." The queen then bustled off to the guest bedroom, a plan already forming in her clever mind. She went straight to the bed and stripped off all the bedding, right down to the bare wooden bed frame. Then she went to the royal kitchen garden and picked a single tiny green pea. She placed this one little pea right in the center of the bedstead. After that, she called for the servants. "Bring all the mattresses," she commanded, and they did. They brought 20 thick, fluffy mattresses and stacked them one on top of the other, right on top of that tiny pea. It was a tower of mattresses, reaching halfway to the ceiling, but the queen wasn't finished yet. "Now bring the feather beds," she ordered. So the servants brought 20 of the softest, most luxurious eider-down feather beds and piled those on top of the 20 mattresses. The bed was now ridiculously, comically high. You'd need a stepladder just to get into it. It looked less like a bed and more like a very soft, very wobbly skyscraper. The queen stood back, admired her handiwork, and chuckled to herself. "There," she said. "That should do the trick." She then led the mysterious girl to the room. The princess's eyes widened when she saw the mountain of a bed. Oh my, she said, trying to be polite. That's a very tall bed. Only the best for our guests, the queen said sweetly, patting her hand. Have a wonderful night's sleep, dear. The servants had to bring a tall ladder so the princess could climb all the way to the top. She carefully made her way up, step by step, until she finally reached the summit and disappeared into the fluffy feather beds. The queen wished her good night one last time and closed the door, her secret smile wider than ever. The next morning, the royal family gathered for breakfast. Soon, the princess joined them. The queen looked at her closely. "And how did you sleep, my dear?" she asked, her voice full of false concern. The princess tried to smile, but she looked absolutely exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she yawned behind her hand. "Oh, dreadfully," she replied. "I hardly closed my eyes all night. Heaven knows what was in that bed. I felt like I was lying on something hard and round, and I'm black and blue all over my body. It was simply awful. I haven't had such a terrible night in my entire life." The moment she said those words, the entire room fell silent. The prince stared at her, his jaw dropping open. The king looked at the queen, and the queen? She was beaming. She clapped her hands together in delight. "Aha!" she exclaimed. "Now we know for sure that you are a real princess." Everyone looked confused, especially the princess. "What do you mean?" she asked. The queen explained. Only a true princess, with the most delicate and sensitive skin, could possibly feel a tiny pea through 20 mattresses and 20 eider-down feather beds. It's the ultimate test. The prince, who'd been so skeptical, now looked at the girl with newfound admiration and awe. He had traveled the world and met countless princesses, but none had ever passed such an impossible test. This girl, this exhausted, bruised, and slightly confused girl, was the one. She was a real princess. And so the prince, completely convinced and utterly smitten, asked her to be his wife. She, of course, said yes. After all, a prince who lived in a castle with such ridiculously high standards and beds was surely the man for her. The wedding was the grandest the kingdom had ever seen, and as for the pea, it wasn't thrown away or eaten. Oh no, it was given a place of honor. They put it in the royal museum on a velvet cushion inside a glass case, so that everyone could come and see the little pea that had proven a princess's true identity. And if it hasn't been lost or stolen, you can still go and see it there to this very day. The prince and princess lived happily, and presumably very comfortably, ever after, as long as there were no peas hidden in their bedding. And that, my friends, is the story of the princess and the pea. I hope you have a wonderful, peaceful, and pea-free night's sleep. Good night.